Oh, really? Let's see what you got. Welcome, dear viewers, such of you that are. Today we're going to take a close look at and dissect a video by the Yaqueen Institute called 5 Clear Proofs That God Exists. First, who is the Yaqueen Institute? Well, they appear to be a moderate Islamic educational institute which seems to be trying to bridge the gap between Islamophobia in the West and the radicalization of Islam by offering the more moderate and mainstream Muslim a voice. At least they do not seem to be preaching hatred against the infidel, nor are they calling for jihad against non-believers. Links to their webpage and the original video are in the description below. Now, to be fair, even though the group that produced the original video is Muslim, the video does not mention Allah by name, nor do they attempt to push their version of God onto the viewer, but rather are trying to make the argument that God exists. And here are the proofs. My best guess is they're going for a two-point approach. First, get people to agree that yes, God does exist. And once that has been established, try to prove that their version of God is the correct one. It should be noted that more than a few fundamentalist Christians have latched onto these same concepts as proof of their own God's existence. Anyways, let's take a look at what they have to offer. Okay, let's take a look at the three main points of number 1, the precision of nature. Point 1. Nature is governed by precisely measured laws that ensure the existence of life. Such laws stretch well beyond the scope of coincidence. And while we do live in a universe of laws, such as the conservation of energy, the laws of gravity, and universal constants such as the speed of light, we have no proof that these laws were dictated by a god or gods. And as we dwell deeper into the quantum world, we are finding many of these laws do not apply. In fact, there may be many sets of laws in play within our universe, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface in discovering them. To imply that a god has set these laws in place to ensure the existence of life is easily disproven, as the majority of the universe is actually hostile to most forms of life we know. And that's for point 2. Physicist Robert Collins' comment on the Big Bang. Well, first off, Collins' PhD is not in physics, but rather philosophy. And yes, while he did earn a triple BA in the majors of physics, mathematics, and philosophy, and yes, he even did begin his PhD in physics, after 2 years he switched majors to philosophy, and that's what he earned his PhD in, philosophy, not physics. And I will grant you that, compared to most of the religious apologists and rationalists, he does have an infinitely better grasp of physics and the sciences than most of his ilk. But he's basically turned his back on science to follow a theist past, and thus is not what you would call an unbiased expert. However, his point that life could not exist had the Big Bang been stronger cannot be proven, as this is the only universe we currently exist in and can observe. For now, that is. However, had the Big Bang either been stronger or weaker, there is nothing to say that life could not exist in such a universe. It might not be life as you and I know it, but it could well be life. We just do not know. Point 3, the magic bullet. This comes from a book authored by Michael J. Murray, a man whose PhD is in philosophy and who is basically an evangelical Christian apologist who has no real training in the sciences. Also, the quote comes from page 49 of his book, Reasons for Hope Within, and may have absolutely no connection with Collins' point. It could well have been taken out of context because it sounds good, and it appears to reinforce Collins' point. This linking of two separate comments without actually showing the linkage or how it works is dishonest to say the least. But what I do find rather interesting is that a Muslim group is citing two evangelical Christian apologists to make their point that God exists. Could they not find any Muslim scholars to quote mine? Ah yes, the good old something from nothing argument, which basically says in order for A to exist, B must have happened, and for B to have happened, C must have triggered it. Or to put it into theological terms, the universe exists. In order for it to exist, something must have caused it, therefore God. And theists of all stripes and beliefs will use this argument even if they're pushing the Genesis story of the Bible or the Big Bang Theory. Either way, God caused it. And it makes sense. Right up to the point where some smartass points out the elephant in the room that everybody is trying to ignore and pretend it's not there. And that is, if God created the universe, who or what created God? After all, something cannot come from nothing. That means something had to have created God in the first place in order for God to create the universe. And if something created God, what or who created that something? And once you start down this path, you quickly realize you're on the slippery slope of infinite linear regression. And this was amply demonstrated in Robert A. Heinlein's book, Job, A Comedy of Errors, where Satan, taking pity on the protagonist, took him to plead his case against Yahweh, and stated to the protagonist that, as you are to me and Yahweh, so we are to the being that we are about to see. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend you do. And again, the Yaqueen Institute is using a Christian theologian and philosopher to argue that God exists, this time one Michael Hanby. Now the crux of this argument is that creation, or rather God's creation, is a perfect design, created by a master engineer and designer. Well, one look at the universe, the planet, and ourselves quickly puts pay to that theory. For if any of these were designed by a God, he is one shitty engineer. I could go on about how the universe and Earth really do not demonstrate an intelligent mind behind their designs, as both of these are actually very hostile to our own unique forms of life and seem to be designed to kill us off. Instead, however, I will look at the human body. In the Bible, we are told that we are created in the likeness of God. If that is so, then God himself is far from being perfect, as the human body is a pretty shoddy bit of work. Our cardiopulmonary system is that of a four-legged animal, and is not designed for an animal that walks erect. While the pump, aka the heart, that runs the system is pretty much located in our body's center mass, the control system for all our body's functions, the brain, sits up as far away possible from that pump in our skull. Meanwhile, gravity is always trying to pull our blood supply away from our brain and down towards our feet, meaning the heart has to work extra hard just to ensure proper blood flow to the brain. So this particular part of the human design leaves a lot to be desired, efficiency-wise. The one part of the human body many creationists hold up as proof of God's hands in our design is the human eye. The argument goes that the human eye is so complex, so perfect, that it could not have randomly occurred, that it had to have been designed by a creator, aka a god. And yet while the human eye is complex, it's a bit of a botched job if designed by a god. Many other animals, such as felines, birds, and even insects, have much better eyesight than we do. Hunting animals, such as the great cats and wolves, have much better night vision than we do, and that allowed them to hunt us during the night back in the day. A number of insects, such as bees, can see into the ultraviolet spectrum, although red would appear black to them. And eagles and other raptors can see even small prey animals from far greater distances than we can see with our eyes. So at best, it could be said our eyes, while complex and functional, are at best adequate. Not great, but good enough to get the job done. Further proof that our bodies are poorly designed is the fact that between 90 and 95% of all plant life on the planet is toxic to us. And while most will only cause minor irritations or allergic reactions, others can kill us stone dead in minutes, if not seconds. We are also very susceptible to many water and airborne microbes, which again can kill us. Insect life is also deadly to us, either from passing on diseases such as the plague or Ebola, or they have toxins of their own which can make us very ill and or kill us. And our own bodies are subject to internal failures, many of which will make us ill, cripple us, and ultimately kill us. As we age, errors occur in our very DNA coding, leading to things such as cancers and other potentially fatal health issues. When we honestly look at ourselves, our planet, and our universe, we have to conclude that none of these things are remotely perfectly designed, that each has issues and design flaws, major design flaws, which means one of two things. Either there was no intelligent guiding hand designing the universe, or two, if there was a designer, he was utterly incompetent and should be sued for botching up the job. Dr. Dean Hammer, an American geneticist, postulated in his book The God Gene that humans are predisposed to look for and find God, and that this instinct could be genetic in nature. That is to say, we are hardwired to do so. The concept comes from studies of the VMAT2 proteins and the role these neurotransmitters play in our higher brain function, especially during religious and other spiritual experiences. Dr. Hammer never claimed that the study of the VMAT2 proteins proved that God actually existed, just that humans may have a genetic predisposition to look for and find God, or any other number of spiritual events. Indeed, the very same sense of spiritual wonderment and ecstasy many of religious people feel from focusing on God can be seen in other non-religious people as they contemplate the universe in a non-theological way. It should be noted that Dr. Hammer's hypothesis was based only on one unpublished and unreplicated study, and it has not been accepted by the scientific community at large. Even Dr. Hammer states that the VMAT2 study does not account for all religious or spiritual feelings, but rather points to just one neurological pathway that may explain the sensation. And yet another Christian creationist. At least this one has a bit of a scientific background. But for the institution whose purpose is to promote moderate Islam, we here to use a lot of Christian source material. Dr. Barrett holds a PhD in psychology, and more importantly, is a Christian creationist. That is to say, he firmly believes that his version of God created the universe, and thus cannot be honestly called unbiased. Dr. Barrett claims that, quote, the human being is a deeply spiritual being that yearns for inner peace, moral education, and purpose is interest. First off, deeply spiritual beings? Most of the humans I've known and met, including many who are religious, are far from being spiritual, let alone deeply spiritual. Most humans are far too concerned with the day-to-day struggle and survival, and are, in fact, quite materialistic. I would argue that very few people in this world are deeply spiritual. Religious, yes, but not truly spiritual. And yes, most people long for inner peace. It's just to reduce their stress levels and discomfort. But moral education? Why? Most of us get our moral education very early in life, from our parents, our teachers, and in society at large. We really do not need or look for additional moral education once we pass childhood. As for purpose, most of us have an idea what our purpose is. In many ways, this quote sounds very patronizing, as if humanity was nothing more than children needing to seek Daddy, aka God's approval and attention. Kind of insulting, really. The next quote states, those who believe in God attain a state of spiritual fulfillment and tranquility, regardless of their physical condition, for they are in tune with the divine. What a fucking load of grade A bullshit. First off, many who believe in God do not attain a state of spiritual fulfillment or tranquility. In fact, quite the opposite occurs in many cases. They live in fear of their God and his divine punishment, always worrying that they may have transgressed one of his many laws, knowing that they are filled with sin, worthy only of divine retribution, and then falling to their knees, begging for forgiveness and redemption from their loving God. Not all the religious believers are like this, true, but a large percentage are. Dr. Barrett seems to say only those that believe in God can attain a state of spiritual fulfillment and tranquility, and yet he chooses to ignore those that have attained these states while being non-theists or atheists, if you will. Attaining spiritual fulfillment, tranquility, having a moral compass, and a sense of purpose does not require having a divine being ruling your life. Many of us non-believers have achieved all those and more. We also have the added bonus in life of being truly free-willed, and independent of having to answer to a vindictive and twisted bastard of a God such as described in both the Bible and Quran. When it started, the source video claimed it would demonstrate 5 clear proofs that God exists, and yet in the end it offered nothing of the sort. All it did for the most part was rehash a lot of already debunked and disproven claims from Christian creationists, which is very odd considering that the producers of this video are Muslim. No verifiable, quantifiable, or measurable proofs or evidence were provided that categorically proves the existence of any God. So all in all, it rates a fail. Anyways, thank you for watching, dear viewers. If you enjoyed this video, please rate, comment, and share. Oh, and feel free to subscribe. Every sub is like a pat on the back.